begin in Cleveland. So I'm going to make the following statement. If I said Joe Flacco starting at quarterback for the Browns is the correct move, would you say that's right or wrong?
I think that's the wrong move. I think you should have looked at one of these rookies to see if you had your franchise quarterback in the building, whether it's Shedeur Sanders or Dillon Gabriel, who I felt both had good debuts here in the preseason. You know what Joe Flacco is. Don't make the comfortable, familiar decision. Figure out if one of these young men that you drafted in the 3rd or the 5th round could be the guy.
Dan, I have been saying all along, I have gotten the sense from you, and you were there, that this was never particularly close to that happening.
Because everybody else got hurt. Like, do you want him to start the rookie with the hamstring injury or the rookie with the oblique injury? Or like they're not, those guys didn't get the practice time they needed in training camp to be ready yet. So, look, they didn't announce yesterday that Joe Flacco's starting all 17 games. They're starting the first one. So I do think they're still in the back of their minds. Like, look, first of all, you don't know how a season's going to go. Let's say Flacco and the Browns start 5-0, right? Then you keep it rolling. We don't feel like that's likely. At some point, I do think they'll get a look at these rookies, but I don't think as good as, they had their moments in their preseason games, but I think there's still work to do with both of them, and starting Flacco is an admission of that.
That's fair. I'm with RC. I've been from the jump saying start one of those rookies. I think the most interesting thing right now is who's going to be QB2, who comes out, because the depth chart really hasn't mattered up until this point, all that stuff.
Sanders has been 4 pretty much throughout.
Yeah, and Kenny Pickett really hasn't done much because of the injury. So if I'm Cleveland, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, you put one of these rookies at QB2, maybe you put both of them, dress them both, and just get them ready for October and November. Because
Dan, I have a question. Should the work at practice be different than what you normally delegate the practice reps, right? Because a lot of times when you're the 2, you don't get a ton of time with the starting offense or the ones. If you have one of these guys listed as 2nd on the depth chart, are you preparing them in a different way than what you normally would?
Yeah, I would slightly, a little bit, yes. I would slightly, but you also, Kevin Stefanski, the head coach, has got to make sure that they're doing everything they can for everybody else to get ready to win the game. This isn't just, hey, we're just focused on the quarterback, so it's a fine balance, but I do think getting those guys reps in preparation for what the plan is, whether they're having decent success or not, should be at the forefront.
That's the key. The next couple weeks, you got to get Flacco ready to start the game, obviously. But you also have to figure out who the 2 is, because the 2 could play at any second, right? Like we saw Brian Daboll throwing Jackson Dart into the game without telling him ahead of time, right? Because you want to know if he can do that. So is it Gabriel, is it Pickett, is it Sanders? A, who's the healthiest, and B, who's prepared to do that? Like jump in a game.
It shouldn't be Kenny
Pickett,
though.
Flacco.
It shouldn't be Kenny.
Well, he hasn't practiced.
Shefty suggested yesterday that they would keep all 4 quarterbacks on the roster just as commodities, and you never know, someone trades for a Kenny Pickett or maybe even trades for one of the rookies, depending on how things go along. But keeping 4 quarterbacks on the active roster is for the most part, a rarity. What is your sense of the whole thing, Swagger? They opened, by the way, against the Cincinnati defense. We just spent 10 minutes talking about how bad they are.
This should have never been a competition that we shouldn't have ever said Joe Flacco's name. Like, the plan was Joe Flacco start and let these 3 duke it out to figure out who's going to be our starter eventually. And I'm not a big proponent of them starting at the beginning of the season. I don't know the rep count in practice. I don't know how many looks they had against the number 1 defense. I know Myles Garrett rushing is completely different than the other guys that are in there. But that's what I said after Shedeur's performance. I said that performance should have bought him more reps of good on good in practice to compete for who was going to be the number 2 guy to eventually be the number 1. Like, that sounds logical to me. The one thing that worries me, and we talked about this last night, is if you're getting to this point with Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, and you're saying we're 2 weeks away from the season, now we gonna start treating one of you guys like a backup, and something bad happens to Joe Flacco, both are set up for failure. And that's the part that bothers me. I'm saying if you didn't have Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, because Kenny Pickett has been dealing with the injury, obviously. If you didn't have them getting 2nd team reps, at times getting reps with the 1s, and now you going into this point saying, hey, Dillon, you the 2, or Shedeur, you the 2. Well, bro, I'm so far behind of what it's like to be out there with David Njoku. I'm so far behind game-like scenarios that Joe Flacco has been through a million times.
Yeah.
So let me make sure I'm clear on what you're saying. At this point, they need not only to choose their starter, but choose the backup. They have to pick between the rookies
100%.
I agree.
and say that guy is next.
They can't split reps going forward.
Yeah, like
Absolutely.
you in season.
Flacco gets hurt in the first game, they're not going to look at the sideline and go, who wants to play?
Right.
Like, they got to know who it is that's ready to
and
go.
who's it gonna be?
But shouldn't they have, like, to me, it should have been, if that's your mindset, right, we're going to start one of these veteran guys, it should have been 2 competitions going on at the same time throughout training camp. Figure out who the best older veteran guy is, and we're going to figure out who the best rookie is, and we walk into the season with those 2 people, 1-2 on the depth chart, understanding that's the way we'll play out.
That is my point.
And
For all we know, that's what they did.
If they had all stayed healthy, I think that's exactly what would have happened.
That's the thing.
But they didn't.
Sanders played that entire game because Gabriel was hurt, and then Gabriel
Pickett was
played
hurt.
the entire game
Pickett
because
as well.
Sanders was hurt.
Sure.
So again, we're sort of taking Kenny Pickett out of this, maybe wrongly.
No, wrongly, but he has missed the most practice time this camp.
I guess what I'm saying is, in your mind, and look, we've
don't
seen
know that
whatever
answer.
little we've seen. There's no way to know.
Yeah, I don't
which
know
guy
that answer
should be
because
the number 2.
each guys have one body of work that we know of.
Right.
Yeah.
And by all reports, at least that I've seen, Shedeur's been the best in practice, numerically and just kind of like visually. How reporters have said, like, Shedeur has looked the best day after day after day. They both have had a start and both have played pretty darn well. But to Marcus's point, I do think that's important because, and this is with all due respect to the 2 young kids, the regular season is a different beast.
Yes, sir.
The speed at those starting defenses is a different animal. So, like, you want those guys to get reps against starting defenses. And to RC's question, I do think Cleveland would be smart to build in a period where that backup quarterback as a rookie plays against your starting defense and Flacco doesn't, just because the speed is a different world.
We had periods that was competition periods. Right, you'd be the end of the practice, and you might say, okay, we're going 3rd down here, we're going 2-minute here, we're going red zone here, right? It's unscripted, and both coaches on each side of the ball are calling the plays as the ball moves. Those guys need those sorts of reps against the Myles Garretts and the Denzel Washingtons in case they have to be thrust into the game.
It's pretty rare.
Denzel Washington?
But
I'm sorry,
Denzel
Ward.
Denzel Washington would also be an interesting
I'm putting cases on.
So that really has become the narrative here is, are the Bengals and this dreadful defense in a season coming off a year, and you just heard Troy say it, in which Burrow played about as well as a quarterback can play, and they didn't make the playoffs. Are we concerned that they are wasting this stage of Joe Burrow's career?
Absolutely. I mean, if you watched that game last night and you think about, especially early on last season, we've watched people run for more miles against the Cincinnati Bengals than David Goggins. And he's in like 200.
Stay
hard. Yeah, he's in like 200-mile races every other month. The Cincinnati Bengals are trying to figure out a way to capitalize on having one of the best quarterbacks of this generation. And so what they did in the offseason was re-sign T. Higgins, re-sign Jamar Chase. But now you're looking at a defense that hasn't improved. And not only has it not improved, but you also haven't signed your best player and one of the few impact players that you had on that side of the football. If you're Joe Burrow, the reason that you're out here in the preseason is because you know you have to score 40. The reason that you're trying to do different things